Let's talk about trust in more abstract terms. I feel somewhat depressed after hearing the Edelman report, but I believe that we need to look at it in the long term, in the long run. The progress from Homo sapiens, Homo erectus in the past millennia have demonstrated that we have been able to develop a level of trust that is unbelievable among us, without which we wouldn't be here. And if we think of it carefully, every time we leave our houses in the morning, we assume many things that we take for granted. For instance, that we're not going to crash against anybody on the streets, and then we see that the traffic lights are green, we cross the street, and we don't think that we're going to be run over by a car. So if we think of it in these terms, we understand that the level of trust in our society is very high. So I think that the Edelman report is just a small bump in the road. In order to talk about trust, we have Jerónimo López here. I'm going to explain three brief aspects of his CV, of his resume. Firstly, he is a researcher. He is a PhD in geology. He's a professor emeritus of the Universidad Autónoma. He's also a mountaineer. We have known each other since we were 19, and he is a very remarkable elite mountaineer. I think he was the first Spaniard who reached the top of the Everest without any oxygen, and this was done many years ago, where this accomplishment was much more remarkable. Jerónimo's activity has been very much connected in the past 35 years to the Antarctic. In particular, he has been the manager, and he has also been involved personally in with several bodies working in that region, and he has been the first vice president and vice president of the first scientific research committee working in the Antarctic, which is a very important international entity that was awarded the award Príncipe de Asturias 20 years ago. Time flies, and the nasty truths come about in the end. But without further ado, Jerónimo is going to talk about trust in different areas that might not seem very connected to what we have been talking about today, except from the fact that this is about how to generate, how to build trust. Well, thank you very much, Salvador. Good morning, good afternoon to everyone. Thank you. Thanks to the organizers for thinking that I could add something interesting to this event. I hope I will not let them down, and I hope that I won't bore you in the very few minutes that we have to share. Trust, as Salvador has said, is something that comes with us, or is with us, throughout our lives since we are born. And also trust is actually connected to the generation of a certain hormone, the oxytocin, that is known as the trust hormone, which is connected to the connection, to affection, to empathy, even love, not only among human beings, but also among other mammals. And this is very much related to the social aspects, such as cooperation among the different groups of mammals who cooperate in order to hunt, in order to achieve their goals, in order to survive. The generation of the oxytocin is very important, but also it's important towards establishing those connections. And we trust those who are closer to us, the people that we have seen, how they respond to certain events. And when it comes to the survival situations or stress situations, is also related to this. The fact that we can sacrifice ourselves for another person, or the fact that we can donate something that is important for our survival, is seen more clearly towards those who are closer to us and those who we know and with whom we have worked together in the past. Throughout this trajectory that Salvador has briefly told you about, I have been compelled to going to the mountains, to hostile environments. I've been, the geology has attracted me forever, and working in the Antarctic for many years has made me deal with many facets of trust in different situations, in the environment of group work and also in the field of international relations and interactions. The Antarctic is a very important symbol. The trust among the many aspects that there are to it is a value in itself. In very tough mountains, such as the wall that you can see here in the Captain in El Capitan in California, or in any high mountain, trust is something that you can really feel. It's almost palpable. If you do not have trust, you will never be able to reach the highest mountains. There is a balance between knowing oneself, and this helps us a lot when interacting with other people, when we are very aware of who we are. And also there's a factor of the relations within a group. And for instance, there is a paradigm, an example of this, of Shackleton, an English explorer who wanted to cross the Antarctic and to cross it and come out through the other side. The South Pole had already been reached, but they never even got to the continent that they wanted to reach. Their ship got stuck in the ice, and finally they had to land with these boats. In the Elephant Island, these 18 men were isolated from the rest of the world. The First World War had already started. The world forgot about them. They didn't have any means of communicating with the rest of the world, so they didn't have any other options. So only 6 of them, they took this little sailing boat and they sailed to the next inhabited place, which was above 1,300 kilometers, and they stayed for 4 months there until somebody came to the rescue. They trusted that somebody would come, somebody would arrive. Nobody died there, and they sustained team relations that were key for their survival. In this region, it's still necessary to deal with very difficult situations. This is also in the Elephant Island in 2003. Back then, we had to trust that there would a ship capable of navigating through the ice would arrive and meet us, and we had to create even a vivac that because the helicopters couldn't come due to the fog, and all this has to do with the importance of the international relationships and with the difficulties in that region. It's very important in the current world, and to face the challenges that we face as humanity. We are a planet that is overpopulated, and we see that there are great inequalities, people living in very complicated situations next to very wealthy areas. We are also facing climate change, the global warming, and there's a loss of ice, and this process affects mostly the poles, but also the rest of the world. There's also a great pollution of the land, of the seas. We are losing our biodiversity, and as a society, we do have some tools, some weapons to fight this. One of them is science. Science has demonstrated their accomplishments. sometimes I've been asked, why would you go to do any research 13,000 kilometers away in the Antarctic just to know how much ozone there is in the stratosphere when we have necessities so close to us? Well, one of the answers is thanks to this research from the beginning of the 1960s and until to the beginning of the 1980s, this enabled us to see that the ozone layer was being broken and that we needed to take measures to solve this. We have ships studying the oceans. We have biomedicine. With the pandemic in COVID-19, we saw that this was one of the elements that should have eliminated any doubts that people might have had regarding science and the research, broadly speaking. And for this, we need to rely on the governments in order to make the right decisions. We are unfortunately not in the best of times to base decisions on science. We see that there are deniers and not everybody understands that we have one single planet, that we are all interconnected, and that we need global solutions to face all this. And the Antarctic is a very good example of all this. It was almost a source of international conflict, and many countries were looking at this region and wanted to keep one portion of the Antarctic. Fortunately, thanks to multilateral action in which Russia and the United States played a very important role, it was decided not to let the Antarctic become a source of international conflict, and they approved the Antarctic Treaty that was signed in 1959 and was implemented 2 years later. And this forbid any military actions, the use of the place to leave any nuclear waste, and had forced countries to take decisions as jointly. And this has been enlarged. This has been turned into a system where the environmental protection systems and the protection of this legacy for humanity have been reinforced. There was a protocol that was signed in 1991 and enforced in 1998, establishes that the Antarctic is devoted to peace, to science, and also to the environmental protection. For instance, it has been forbidden to exploit the minerals for 50 years after its implementation. So this is just an example. Until 2048, no minerals can be exploited from that region. But this is an area that does not belong to any country. The continent represents about 10% of the emerged lands around the world, although the territory includes also a great portion of sea, and such a vast territory, so full of wealth, is submitted to a protocol that has been used for almost 60 years, that has resisted even the Cold War period. Obviously, when there are crises such as this one, we need to tone it down, of course, but it has been resilient, and we hope that it will resist in the future. And it is a model of the way that humanity needs to face the challenges in a collective manner. Thank you so much for your attention.